My name is Stephanie Larson. I've just turned 30 years old. Life has never been easy. But I'm trying my best to smile every day for my 6-year-old son, Jackson. 7 years ago, I experienced the greatest joy and sorrow of my life simultaneously. My husband Michael died in a car accident. From that day on, my world changed completely. Michael's father, Raymond Larson, is a wealthy man who wasn't happy about our marriage from the start. After his son's death, he began to blame me. He said, "It's because you rushed him." But that's not true. Still, Raymond's anger and sadness are reflected in his cold attitude towards me and Jackson. My mother-in-law Elizabeth is Raymond's second wife. She's on our side, but she hasn't been able to soften her husband's anger. Now, I'm raising my son while working as a waitress. Life isn't easy, but my passion for music has become my hope. When I play the piano, I feel free and sense a connection with my son and late husband. This is the beginning of my story. A life melody woven with suffering, hope, and music. I don't know yet how this song will unfold, but I believe it will end in a beautiful harmony.
The magnificent mansion's hallway was adorned with colorful flowers. Raymond was captivated by Elizabeth's figure as she walked along the floral path. As she approached, Raymond's eyes began to shine with joy. In his heart, Elizabeth was the embodiment of his long-held dreams. A gentle breeze swayed the outdoor decorations, and Second Spring echoed through the space. This song was chosen to symbolize the beginning of their new life together. Raymond felt that each melody perfectly expressed their hope for a fresh start, and he smiled involuntarily. The moment Elizabeth reached the altar and took Raymond's hand, their eyes met. In that gaze was a silent vow to walk together into the future. Elizabeth whispered in a voice filled with emotion, "You've brought a new spring to my life, Raymond." When I heard Second Spring, I knew it represented our new beginning. At this moment, their love entered a new season along with the music. They both loved classical music, which was one of the many things they had in common.
I picked up the canapes and champagne glasses with a gentle smile. From a corner of the party, I watched the guests celebrating Raymond and Elizabeth's love. As I glanced at my husband Michael chatting in the distance, a thought crossed my mind. I wonder if we'll be celebrated like this someday. Feeling the baby move slightly in my belly, my heart filled with hope for a happy future. Seeing my father-in-law Raymond smile, I realized the importance of family bonds. On this special day, it felt like our family was also starting a new chapter. I watched the children playing with flower petals on the lawn. They don't yet understand the depth of love being celebrated here. I placed my hand on my belly and whispered softly, "When you're born, you'll grow up surrounded by this kind of love, my little treasure." I smiled, feeling a mix of hope and a little anxiety. Suddenly, my attention was drawn to the musician's performance. Captivated by the beautiful melody, I found myself swaying unconsciously. How do they create such wonderful music? Filled with curiosity, I listened intently to the performance. Maybe someday our child will move people like this too. With such dreams in my heart, I let myself be carried away by the music.
Meanwhile, at the musicians' table, Kevin, the band leader and music producer, was watching the newlyweds. As a close friend of Raymond and Elizabeth, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction being present at this special moment. As he adjusted the microphone before announcing the next song, Kevin made a silent wish. "May our music bring them joy today and always." The musicians knew that every note they played that day would be etched in the hearts of not only the bride and groom, but all the guests as well.
Before Kevin started the next song, I noticed his expression. Beneath his professional demeanor, I could see a gentle kindness, genuinely happy for his friends. As the music began, I found myself closing my eyes. The melody filled the space, seeming to seep into my very being. I felt that this music would become a special memory etched in the hearts of everyone here today. I gently placed my hand on my belly, wanting the baby to hear this music too. Can you feel it too? This moment of happiness? Enveloped in the music, I let my thoughts drift to our family's future.
Raymond and Elizabeth walked hand in hand among the guests, filled with gratitude. Raymond whispered to Elizabeth, "Being here with you now, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world. Let's stay together until death parts us." His words were filled with deep sincerity, but he didn't yet know how strong and true that promise would become. 2 years after the wedding, their bond had deepened through various joint projects. One day, Raymond was reviewing the plans for a new wing of the mansion dedicated to art courses for underprivileged children. "Elizabeth, look at how we're utilizing the natural light here. We want to create a space that not only teaches, but also inspires." Elizabeth enthusiastically analyzed the details, sharing Raymond's passion. She said with a voice full of determination and pride, "This will truly bring about real change in these children's lives. I'm proud that we're doing this together."
I sat in front of the old keyboard in the small living room of our tiny apartment. Some of the keys don't work, but still, this is our treasure for now. "Jackson, come here," I call to my son. "Even if some keys don't function, every sound we can make from this keyboard is a step towards understanding the power of music." Jackson approaches the keyboard with a serious expression. But soon, he frowns. "But Mom, why don't some of the keys work? I'm worried this might be ruining the music." Though the fatigue from a long day's work permeates my body, I smile. "Think of them as difficulties we encounter in life, my child. Not everything always works perfectly, but what's important is that we do our best with what we have." Seeing a small light of understanding in Jackson's eyes, my heart warms. At night, after Jackson has fallen asleep, I return to the keyboard. As I quietly play a tune, I dream of the future. Someday, Jackson and I will have more than this. I'm sure of it. Hope and determination fill my heart. My fingers glide over the worn-out keys. Even this sound feels like it's showing us the path to our future. "Michael, how different it would be if you were here. But I believe you're watching over us. Jackson and I will overcome this together. That's my promise to you."
In the mansion, days after the wedding turned into years, and on a seemingly ordinary day, Raymond and Elizabeth were enjoying breakfast in the spacious kitchen. The morning sunlight streamed through the glass windows, bathing the space in golden light. Elizabeth, who usually shared conversations and laughter, was quiet today, fidgeting nervously with her coffee cup. "Are you all right, Elizabeth? You seem a bit distant this morning," Raymond asked, his voice tinged with worry as he observed his wife. He noticed she looked paler than usual, and her hand holding the cup was trembling slightly. Elizabeth looked up, trying to force a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm just a bit tired, Raymond." "Nothing to worry about," she answered, but her voice was weak, and she knew she couldn't hide her condition much longer. As the day progressed, Raymond watched Elizabeth with growing concern. She spent more time in the garden, absent-mindedly gazing at the flowers they had planted together. "These roses are so beautiful this year," Elizabeth commented, but her voice lacked its usual enthusiasm. The sadness in her eyes was evident, a growing shadow day by day. Later that afternoon, Raymond found Elizabeth resting in the bedroom. Despite the heat outside, she was wrapped in a blanket, her breathing slow, each breath seeming to require effort. "Darling, we need to get you to a doctor. We can't ignore this," Raymond insisted, his voice filled with fear and urgency. He couldn't bear to watch Elizabeth getting sick without doing anything, feeling that something serious was happening. Reluctantly, Elizabeth agreed, And after a series of tests, the news came as a devastating shock. Elizabeth had a rare progressive illness. "There's not much they can do, Raymond. I need your support," Elizabeth said with tears in her eyes. She was trying to be strong in front of Raymond, but he held her hand tightly, looking devastated. In the months that followed, the mansion that was once filled with laughter and plans became a place of silence and shadows. Raymond spent hours by Elizabeth's bedside, holding her hand, reading to her, or simply sharing the silence that stretched between them. The good days felt like gifts, and Elizabeth's smiles were treasures Raymond cherished, even as he faced the anxiety of tomorrow. On a quiet afternoon, while Elizabeth slept, Raymond walked through the garden, lost in thought. How can someone so full of life waste away so quickly? He questioned himself, unable to accept the cruel reality. Even the plants Elizabeth had cherished seemed to wilt, as if in solidarity with her suffering. Returning to the room, Raymond sat beside Elizabeth, watching over her peaceful sleep. He took her hand, feeling its coldness and fragility. "I'm here, Elizabeth, no matter what," he whispered. It was a quiet promise made to himself in the stillness of the room. When Elizabeth woke, she looked at Raymond with the calmness of someone who had accepted their fate. "Thank you for being here, my love. I couldn't have made it this far without you," she murmured. Her voice was barely a whisper. Raymond struggled to hold back tears, simply squeezing her hand. He knew these moments were becoming more precious day by day. As the sun set, bathing the room in orange and golden hues, Elizabeth closed her eyes for the last time. Raymond was left with memories of their days together and a silence that felt heavier than the darkness of night. Raymond felt a deep pain. It was as if a part of his soul had bid farewell along with Elizabeth. He remained by her side, sinking into a sea of grief and memories, continuing to hold her hand even after she had taken her last breath. And he cried all night for the loss of his beloved.
As I adjust my apron, I take a deep breath. This modest bar on the outskirts of town is my battlefield now. I was hired recently, but this job is a lifeline supporting Jackson and me. The pile of bills, Jackson's growth, everything depends on this job. The bar's atmosphere is warm but simple. Soft music plays, and worn-out furniture tells its own story. But the regulars don't notice such details. I move quickly between tables, pouring beer, delivering simple dishes. Each movement has naturally become ingrained in my body. I hope this job remains stable, I whisper to myself as I hand a glass to a customer. Jackson's smiling face appears in my mind. I hear his voice saying, "I want a new book." He needs new clothes for school too. "Michael, if only you were here." No, I must shake off such thoughts. I have no choice but to look forward. Taking orders, delivering food, serving with a smile. Every tip I earn from this job is connected to Jackson's future. Even as I drag my tired feet, I don't give up. Our life is a new chapter beginning from this small bar.
At the mansion, dawn brought a silence that had become all too familiar to Raymond. Waking up became a daily reminder of Elizabeth's absence, each morning a constant battle with pain. Since Elizabeth's death, Raymond had changed. Once a man with a generous heart and warm spirit, he had now become a bitter presence consumed by anger and resentment. His reflection in the mirror looked older than his age, his eyes harboring deep sadness and growing contempt for the world around him. That morning especially, the house felt more suffocating than usual. Raymond dressed without thinking, his chosen clothes no longer reflecting his state of mind, merely serving to cover his body. Breakfast became a mechanical task, tasteless food passing his lips without bringing any joy. "I need to get out of here," he muttered to himself. His voice was a harsh whisper of despair. Without a clear destination, Raymond got into his car. It was a powerful vehicle he rarely used. As he drove aimlessly, the city streets passed by in a blur. The sound of the engine filled the emptiness in his chest. First, he stopped at a luxury store, buying clothes he neither wanted nor needed, and a watch that no longer held any sparkle for him. Each purchase was a futile attempt to fill the void Elizabeth had left. Every transaction reminded him of the futility of his efforts. As night fell, Raymond entered an unfamiliar bar. He was driven by a desire to drown his sorrows in alcohol. The bar's atmosphere was dark and somewhat decadent. It was a place his former self would have avoided, but now it seemed to perfectly match his gloomy mood. He sat in an isolated corner and ordered a double whiskey. Watching other patrons laugh and converse, his heart was in turmoil. Their lives seemed unscathed at first glance. Then, through his already alcohol-blurred vision, he saw a familiar figure moving between the tables. It was Stephanie. The presence of this waitress was like a distant echo of happier times. He hadn't seen her since before his son died. Yes, since the party at his wedding to Elizabeth. Raymond observed her serving customers with quiet efficiency. Each of her movements contrasted with the chaos of his own life. It's been since the wedding. I wonder what life is like for a waitress working in such an ordinary place. She must be truly desperate to work here. How pitiful. As Stephanie approached Raymond's table to take another order, she looked up, and for a moment their eyes met. Recognition and surprise mingled in her expression. Raymond remained motionless. The closeness of their parallel life paths suddenly became apparent.
As I approached Raymond's table, my heart ached at his appearance. There was no trace of the dignified father-in-law I once knew. "Is there anything else I can help you with besides the whiskey?" I asked carefully. I hoped he wouldn't notice the concern I couldn't hide in my eyes. Raymond looked up at me, and I could see contempt and irritation in his eyes. "Just bring what I ordered quickly. I'm not here to be analyzed by a waitress." Those words made my heart sink. "Certainly. I'll bring it right away," I answered matter-of-factly and left. I thought to myself, we all carry our own crosses. Some are just not visible to others. I returned with the whiskey and placed it gently on the table. Gathering my courage, I spoke up. "You seem to be carrying a heavy burden. If you'd like to talk, sometimes sharing can lighten the load." Raymond's reaction was as I expected. "Someone like you couldn't understand. You're just showing me how cruel life can be." I maintained my composure and answered gently. "We all have to weather our own storms. Please don't underestimate others' capacity for understanding, regardless of what tables they're waiting on." Then, Raymond's attitude softened a bit. "My wife recently passed away," he confessed. "Since then, everything seems meaningless, and I'm just trying to forget. But every attempt is futile." My heart resonated with his pain. "I'm very sorry for your loss. The weight of grief can be unbearable at times, but believe it or not, pain eventually creates space for good memories." However, Raymond didn't accept these words. "You don't understand anything. There's no good time after death. Just an all-consuming emptiness." I took a step back, respecting his emotions. It may feel that way now. But life has ways of going on even when we think we can't. If you want to talk, I'm here. As I watched Raymond, I remembered my own experiences. "Michael, the pain of losing you. But now is not the time to reveal that pain. All I can do is watch over this wounded father-in-law."
Raymond watched as Stephanie returned to work. His thoughts sank deeper into bitter sorrow. In his heart, contempt for Stephanie grew. A simple waitress couldn't possibly understand life and grief, he thought. At that moment, the bar door opened, and a small figure burst in. It was Jackson, now 6 years old. He spotted his mother, and his eyes lit up. With a joyful cry, he ran towards Stephanie. Stephanie welcomed her son with a warm embrace. "Mom, school was amazing today. We learned about stars," Jackson exclaimed. His innocent joy transformed the atmosphere of the modest bar. Raymond watched the scene, feeling his inner contempt grow even more. Though he knew Jackson was his grandson, Raymond's heart remained cold. Having lost his beloved son and wife, nothing mattered to him anymore. She can barely take care of herself, yet she's raising a child, he thought. Every time he saw Stephanie and Jackson, his conviction that they were destined for a life of poverty strengthened. Raymond recalled his once lavish birthday parties. He inwardly scoffed at the image of Stephanie and Jackson being there. Suddenly, driven by a cruel impulse, Raymond slowly stood up. Feeling the effects of alcohol, he walked towards the bar counter. "Stephanie," Raymond called out. His voice was a mix of coldness and formal politeness. "There's a party at my house next Saturday. Would you and your son like to come?" His words concealed complex emotions.
Raymond's words caught me off guard. His sudden change in attitude filled me with confusion and mistrust. "Father-in-law, that's very..." The words almost escaped my lips, but I hesitated for a moment. I took a deep breath to calm myself. "That's a kind offer. We would be honored to attend," I answered politely. I struggled to keep my voice from trembling. Unable to grasp the true intention behind this invitation, my mind was in turmoil. Still, I tried to maintain a calm expression. Thinking of Jackson, I knew I couldn't pass up this opportunity. It might be a chance to mend our relationship with my father-in-law. However, the cold glint in Raymond's eyes fueled my anxiety. I still didn't understand what this invitation meant. Nevertheless, with a small flame of hope in my heart, I decided to look forward.
Raymond's inner thoughts were filled with cold derision. "This is going to be more interesting than I thought," he mused. In his mind, he had already pictured Stephanie feeling uncomfortable in the upper-class environment. He was convinced this invitation would be the perfect opportunity to prove the gap between her and high society. Raymond, feigning superficial politeness, bid a brief farewell. Then he slowly returned to his table. His gait betrayed an anticipation for the events to come. However, beneath that expectation lay deep sorrow and anger. Raymond couldn't see how his actions might hurt others. Or perhaps he was intentionally ignoring that possibility. His heart was clouded by grief for the family he had lost. And now, that grief had transformed into coldness towards others.
I couldn't shake off this uneasy feeling about why Raymond had really invited us to his party. A few days flew by, and before I knew it, the night of Raymond's lavish birthday party came. As we pulled up to the mansion, I was struck by how it glowed under the moonlight, like something out of a fairy tale. Fancy cars were rolling in one after another, filled with guests dressed to the nines. I could hear their carefree laughter and chatter. These folks were clearly used to this kind of high society shindig. I'd done my best to look elegant in a simple dress, and made sure Jackson was spiffed up in his cleanest, nicest clothes. Still, I knew we looked out of place compared to the other guests in their designer duds. I gave Jackson's hand a squeeze and whispered some encouragement, reminding him that we were invited guests just like everyone else. I was trying to sound confident, but honestly, my stomach was doing somersaults. We made our way over to the gift table, and I carefully placed the card I'd written among all the fancy wrapped boxes. As I set it down, I said a little prayer that Raymond would understand the heartfelt message inside. After dropping off our gift, Jackson and I joined the crowd, taking in the elaborate decorations and the music filling the air. Jackson was wide-eyed with wonder, looking all around in awe of the splendor. But it didn't take long before I noticed the curious, and sometimes disdainful, looks being cast our way. Jackson must have picked up on it too, because he asked me in a quiet, worried voice why people were staring at us like that. I'd been trying to keep my cool, but his question made my heart sink. I knelt down to his level and did my best to explain in a reassuring whisper. I tried to explain to Jackson that sometimes people stare when they see something unexpected. I reminded him that we belonged there just as much as anyone else, and there was no reason to feel inferior. But even as I said those words, I could feel the weight of those stares, like whispers questioning our very presence. As the night went on, I attempted to mingle and chat with some of the other guests. But every conversation felt stilted and superficial, like there was an invisible wall between us that I just couldn't break through. With each passing minute, I felt more and more like a fish out of water in this glitzy world. I started to wonder if Raymond had invited us by mistake, if we really didn't belong here after all. But I didn't want Jackson to see my doubts, so I tried my best to keep my composure. I wanted him to believe there were no barriers he couldn't overcome. Jackson must have sensed my growing discomfort, because he squeezed my hand tighter. He suggested we go check out the garden, saying it looked more fun outside. I could tell he was instinctively looking for an escape from the stuffy atmosphere of the salon. I smiled, grateful for his sensitivity, and agreed it was a wonderful idea. I told him we could go stargazing and look for the constellations he'd learned about in school. I was determined to turn this experience into a positive adventure for both of us. We slipped out of the main hall and into the mansion's gardens, where the starry sky felt like a reminder that the world was so much bigger than this party. As Jackson and I explored the gardens under the soft starlight, I could feel us both starting to relax a little. But just then, Raymond emerged from the shadows and found us. There was a hint of contempt in his smile that he couldn't quite hide. He asked us if we were enjoying the party, and if we'd ever been to an event like this before. His tone made it clear what he really meant by that question. I took a deep breath and responded to Raymond's loaded comment as politely as I could. I told him it was a wonderful party, very elegant, and that Jackson had just been admiring the garden. I added that everything was impressive, trying to keep my voice steady. Raymond let out a chuckle, but it sounded forced, lacking any real warmth. He remarked that he imagined this must be quite a new experience for us. His words stung, but I tried not to let it show on my face. Then he turned his attention to Jackson, who was still holding my hand tightly. Raymond asked Jackson if there was anything in particular he liked about the party. I felt Jackson hesitate, and he looked up at me before answering. My heart swelled with pride when Jackson said he'd been hoping to see the piano I told him about in the salon. His eyes lit up as he shared that his dream was to play a real piano someday. I saw Raymond's eyebrows rise, his expression shifting slightly. He asked Jackson, with a hint of condescension, if he hadn't noticed the piano when we first arrived. Before I could respond, Raymond continued, his voice dripping with disdain. He went on about how expensive and delicate the piano was, saying he preferred only professionals to use it. Then he made a comment about children being careless, and I felt my blood begin to boil. I wanted to defend Jackson, to tell Raymond about the hours my son spent practicing on our old keyboard at home. But I bit my tongue, not wanting to cause a scene at the party. I felt a sharp pang of disappointment, but I did my best to hide it. I told Raymond I completely understood, squeezing Jackson's hand to reassure him. I could almost see the thoughts running through Raymond's head, and they weren't kind. I imagined he was thinking he didn't want a poor child touching his expensive piano, that our shabbiness might somehow tarnish such a refined instrument. He seemed so sure he was justified in protecting his possessions. Just then, one of Raymond's assistants came over and interrupted our conversation. He reminded Raymond it was time to open the presents. Raymond seemed relieved for the distraction and told us we should come watch him open the gifts. As we walked back to the main hall, I casually mentioned that I'd left our present on the table earlier. I added that I hoped he would like it, trying to keep my voice light despite the knot in my stomach. I couldn't help but wonder if he'd even bother to open our modest gift among all the lavish presents from his wealthy friends. The thought made me feel small and out of place all over again. But I pushed those feelings down, determined to keep a brave face for Jackson's sake. As we entered the main hall, I could feel the excitement in the air. Everyone was gathered around the gift table, eagerly waiting for Raymond to start opening presents. I held Jackson close, hoping that despite everything, this might still be a magical moment for him.
As Raymond entered the salon, the guests had already gathered around the gift table. The air was thick with curiosity and anticipation. Raymond took his place at the center, ready to begin the spectacle of opening presents. Stephanie and Jackson positioned themselves to watch Raymond's reaction to their modest gift. The tension between Stephanie and Raymond's vastly different worldviews was palpable. They represented two separate worlds, silently clashing beneath the glitter of the party. The atmosphere in Raymond's party hall became electric as he began opening the gifts. Each present seemed more extravagant than the last. A sports car from a business friend, a luxury watch from Kevin, and other lavish gifts only served to highlight the gulf between Raymond's world and Stephanie's. Raymond held each gift with a delighted smile, while the guests applauded and celebrated his good fortune. "Kevin, this watch is magnificent," Raymond said, grasping his friend's hand. "As always, your taste is impeccable. This must have cost a pretty penny." Kevin returned the compliment with a confident smile. "For a friend who values time and the good moments it brings, the cost of a gift is no object," he replied, raising his glass in a quiet toast. The night progressed with laughter and lively conversation until only one gift remained on the table. It was a simple letter. Raymond picked it up with an exaggerated look of curiosity. Well, here's something from Stephanie," he announced, eliciting chuckles from the guests. Inwardly, Raymond was amused by the simplicity of the gift, feeling a twinge of embarrassment at the attention it brought. As he opened the letter, his sarcastic tone changed to one of surprise. Reading the handwritten words, he repeated in confusion, "Just listen. Just listen," he said aloud, looking around the crowd for Stephanie. At that moment, the first chords of Second Spring began to resonate through the hall. All eyes turned to the piano. There, Stephanie was skillfully playing the keys with a serene expression, while Jackson sang the melody with childlike sweetness beside her. The combination of voice and piano brought a new atmosphere to the environment. It was a genuine emotion, in contrast to the superficial mood from earlier. Many of the guests who had attended Raymond's wedding recognized the music and were swept by waves of nostalgia and emotion. Stephanie's performance was not merely a display of talent, but also a reminder of love and loss that everyone shared in some form. However, Raymond was suddenly overcome with anger. "How dare you play my piano and that song of all things?" he shouted. His voice echoed above the music. "This is a party, not a charity event." Before the embarrassment could fully spread, Kevin intervened. His voice was calm but firm, cutting through the tension. "Raymond, aren't you listening? This is wonderful. Stephanie has real talent. And honestly, Jackson is exceptional." All eyes turned back to Stephanie and Jackson. They noticed Kevin's support and approached him. "I'd like to speak with both of you," Kevin said, guiding them to a quieter corner of the salon. Raymond felt irritated and betrayed. "You've ruined the night," he said commandingly, trying to regain control of the party. As electronic music replaced the song Stephanie had played, the guests dispersed. They were shocked by Raymond's reaction and in awe of Stephanie and Jackson's courage and talent. In the corner of the salon, Kevin was talking to Stephanie and Jackson with a serious yet enthusiastic expression. "Your performance was truly moving," he began. "Stephanie, you and Jackson have a rare talent. I'm a music producer, and I'd like to invest in you. I think more people should have the opportunity to hear this." His eyes shone with the possibility of discovering and shaping raw talent.
I was still shaken by Raymond's reaction and the unexpected turn of events. Taking a deep breath, I thanked Kevin for his kind words and offer. I explained that my son's involvement was crucial to me, as everything I do is for him and with him. I squeezed Jackson's hand as he looked at Kevin with a mix of respect and curiosity. Kevin nodded, understanding my conditions. He assured me that Jackson's talent was evident and that he'd be happy to include him in any plans we made. The smile he gave Jackson warmed my heart, and I saw my son shyly return it. Kevin asked for my contact information, eager to set up a studio meeting to discuss ideas. I could see the excitement in his eyes as he imagined the possibilities of our collaboration. With a mix of nervousness and excitement, I gave Kevin my number. I thanked him again, my voice filled with hope as I said I'd look forward to his call. After our conversation, Jackson and I left the party and returned to our modest apartment. Once home, I sat Jackson down to explain what had happened. I asked him how he felt about Kevin wanting to help us share our love of music with more people. I wanted him to be part of every step of this new journey. Jackson's eyes lit up at the prospect of playing the piano again. He told me eagerly that he wanted to play and sing more, and to have people hear our music. His passion for music, beyond his years, touched my heart. The next morning, just as the sun started to light up the streets, my phone rang. It was Kevin, his voice full of enthusiasm. He wanted to meet at his studio that day to discuss our project and explore some ideas with Jackson and me. Surprised by how quickly he'd reached out, I immediately agreed. I told him we'd be there and asked for the studio address. I couldn't help but mention how excited Jackson was, talking nonstop about Kevin since yesterday. Kevin gave me the address of one of the most elegant studios in the city. After hanging up, I felt a wave of excitement and nerves wash over me. I dressed us both as nicely as our modest wardrobe allowed, trying to impress upon Jackson the importance of this moment. When we arrived at the studio, I was in awe of its elegance and grandeur. It was a world apart from ours, filled with cutting-edge technology and decorated in a style that breathed music and art. I held Jackson's hand tightly and whispered, "We're in this together, no matter what happens." As we stepped inside, I felt like we were on the brink of something life-changing. Jackson and I stepped into the studio together, ready to embark on a new chapter of our lives. The moment we entered, we were enveloped by the vibrant atmosphere of the place. Every corner seemed to pulse with the creative energy of countless musicians who had passed through here. Kevin greeted us with a warm smile and extended his hand for a handshake that conveyed both respect and enthusiasm. He welcomed us to what he called the heart of music, and I felt a thrill run through me at those words. Kevin gave us a tour of the studio, showing off the state-of-the-art equipment and walls adorned with photos of famous musicians. I was a bit intimidated by it all, but Kevin's friendly presence was reassuring. He asked me about the songs I knew and how I had learned them. Taking a deep breath, I shared my story. I told him about my mother, a pianist who had taught me most of the classical pieces I knew before she passed away. My voice caught a little as I remembered the time spent with her at the piano. I explained how I'd researched new songs at the library whenever I could, especially those with available sheet music. Kevin listened attentively, nodding in recognition of the talent and dedication that shone through my words. He suggested we start by building a repertoire with those classical pieces, adding some modern songs to give it a contemporary touch. We spent hours in the studio, carefully selecting each song that would be part of our concert. I was amazed by Jackson's understanding of music, despite his young age. He made suggestions and expressed preferences with the confidence of a born musician. When Kevin concluded by asking us to practice these songs together, assuring us it would be a wonderful performance, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness about our first concert. Finally, the day of the concert arrived. The theater Kevin had chosen was intimate with perfect acoustics, though not the largest in the city. I appreciated that he had invested considerably in this event, knowing the risk of launching unknown artists. As the curtain rose, I noticed quite a few empty seats, but that didn't dampen our enthusiasm. With my heart pounding, I sat at the piano with Jackson standing beside me. As the first notes of a soul song filled the space, I felt the audience's attention lock onto us. Our performance was a tapestry of emotion and technical precision, weaving a melodic story that spoke directly to the hearts of the listeners. The applause, though from fewer people than we'd hoped, was warm and genuine. People stood up, moved by the beauty of the music and the story of perseverance and passion that Jackson and I shared. After the concert, Kevin met us backstage, clearly satisfied despite the less than full house. He hugged us both, telling us how wonderful we were. His words filled me with hope as he assured us this was just the beginning, and that our music would reach many more ears. I wanted to believe him with all my heart.
Raymond, increasingly consumed by the emptiness left by Elizabeth's death, sought temporary escape in fleeting pleasures and meaningless extravagance. His days turned into a series of impulsive shopping sprees and alcohol-soaked nights. Each bottle opened was a failed attempt to forget his pain and responsibilities. "Another one," Raymond ordered at the most expensive bar in the city. His face already showed traces of sleepless nights and wasted days. The laughter and conversations of other patrons sounded like distant noise, far from filling the silence in his heart. At home, unopened boxes and receipts from expensive purchases piled up in the hallway. Costly watches, unworn designer clothes, and still packaged high-tech gadgets, each represented an impulsive expenditure, a fleeting impulse that quickly lost its luster. "It's just money. I have plenty," Raymond muttered to himself, trying to justify his actions. But deep down, an uncomfortable voice began to whisper doubts, reminding him of neglected financial responsibilities and unpaid bills piling up. "I'll sort it out tomorrow," he promised each notice that arrived in the mail. With each ignored notice, the growing pile became larger. Raymond often scoffed at the memory of Stephanie and Jackson's performance, trying to convince himself that his reaction that night was justified. "That waitress thinking she could become a star is ridiculous," he laughed, taking another sip of whiskey. As if someone could play their way out of poverty. These thoughts were meant to reaffirm his social status, but they did little to ease the sense that something fundamental was breaking inside him. As time passed, Raymond's financial reality approached with an urgency he could no longer ignore. The bank began sending more serious notices, and one day a letter arrived at his doorstep. "Mr. Raymond, we regret to inform you that due to continued non-payment, we are initiating foreclosure proceedings on your property," a representative announced, holding a folder full of documents. "What? This must be a mistake." "I have plenty of money," Raymond protested. His voice trembled with anger and fear. However, when he went to check his accounts, reality hit him like a punch. His investments had bottomed out. His main account was nearly empty, consumed by months of neglect and irresponsible spending. "This can't be happening," he muttered, running a shaking hand through his hair. Sitting in his now lonely and spacious living room, faced with the threat of being emptied by the bank, Raymond felt the weight of each wrong decision he had made. The walls that were once symbols of success and power now felt like they were closing in on him. Each piece of art and expensive furniture was a reminder of better times that might never return. "I just wanted to forget. I just wanted the pain to stop," he confessed out loud to no one. The irony of his situation was bitter. In his attempt to escape the reality of Elizabeth's loss, he had further lost himself, sinking into debt and despair, far from any redemption money could buy. A year had passed since Raymond found himself on the brink of financial ruin. Now, far from the luxurious hallways of his former mansion, he lived in a modest apartment very similar to the one Stephanie and Jackson had occupied when they first met. The space was cramped, and the time-worn walls constantly reminded him of his fall from grace. His birthday had come around again. The reality of his new life was starker than ever. With no planned party and no friends still coming to visit, Raymond felt the weight of his loneliness. Determined to find something to eat, he walked to the local bakery. His heart was heavy, his mind full of bitter thoughts about how far he had fallen. On that gloomy journey, he encountered Stephanie. In stark contrast to him, she exuded great success and happiness. It was a vivid juxtaposition to Raymond, now a defeated man who had fallen from his former status. She greeted him with a kind smile. Her expression showed empathy that didn't match the anger he still harbored towards her.
The moment I spotted Raymond, my heart began to race. His fallen state pained me, but I still tried to smile at him. "Raymond, I remember it's your birthday today," I said, praying my voice wouldn't tremble. "I'd like to give you a present," I continued, offering him an envelope. "It's not as luxurious as you're used to, but I hope you'll find value in it." I watched with bated breath as Raymond opened the envelope and found the concert tickets. My heart sank when I saw the look of rejection in his eyes. His words, "Why would I want this? Your music means nothing to me," cut into my heart like a knife. Still, I took a deep breath to maintain my composure. "I understand how you feel, Raymond," I said, trying to keep my voice gentle. "But please, keep the tickets. You might change your mind." Summoning my courage, I added finally, "I'd be happy if you were there. Not as a critic, but as someone who enjoys the art of music." As we parted, I gently encouraged him once more to keep the tickets, but inside I was filled with anxiety about whether he would really come. As I continued on my way, I held on to a small hope for reconciliation with Raymond.
Raymond decided to buy some food and head home. Back in his lonely apartment, he tossed the tickets onto the table. The thought of attending Stephanie's concert made him uncomfortable, yet a part of him was curious. "I've got nothing to lose," he mused, staring at the tickets as afternoon turned to evening. His apartment was quiet, almost suffocatingly empty. With nothing to do and no one to see, loneliness began to weigh heavier than pride. Raymond picked up the tickets again, examining them in the dim light of his living room lamp. "Maybe it's time I see what I've been scorning," he muttered to himself. An inner struggle between past resentment and the possibility of something new filled him. Finally, the desire to escape the walls of his apartment, and perhaps his own mind, spoke louder. Raymond stood up, put on one of his least worn-out outfits, and headed out the door. He tucked the tickets securely in his pocket. That night, he would go to the concert. Not as the once wealthy man who had judged and scorned Stephanie, but as a man seeking to fill the emptiness his life had become. Raymond sat discreetly at the back of the theater, observing the crowd with a mixture of nostalgia and regret. "If not for my arrogance and recklessness, this could have been one of my parties," he thought. People of all ages and social classes had gathered to watch the concert. He could hardly believe Stephanie's transformation from a waitress at his birthday party to an artist beloved by many. When Stephanie and Jackson took the stage, there was a warm welcome from the audience. Stephanie had a magnetic presence, thanking everyone with a radiant smile. Tonight, I'd like to dedicate Second Spring to someone special. Someone I hope can find the joy this music represents, she announced, casting a meaningful glance that Raymond felt was directed right at him. Raymond sank into his chair, a shiver running down his spine. He muttered to himself, realizing Stephanie knew just how broken he was. Shame and curiosity intertwined in his chest. Jackson began playing the piano and singing with his mother. His pure voice filled the theater with raw, genuine emotion. Raymond was captivated not only by the performance, but also by the honesty and vulnerability the music evoked. He questioned his past blindness, each word feeling like a reminder of his past choices and mistakes. As the music progressed, tears began to form in Raymond's eyes. Every note Stephanie and Jackson played made him reflect on their respective journeys, hers to success, his to ruin. He thought about how she had found her path through music, wondering if there might still be hope for him too. Where once there was only despair, hope began to sprout. After the concert, while the entire theater rose for a standing ovation, Raymond remained seated. He absorbed the last echoes of the performance, knowing he couldn't simply return to his old world. That night showed him that even for someone who had lost as much as he had, there might be a path to redemption. In the days and weeks that followed, Raymond began taking concrete steps to change his life. He sought help for his alcohol problem, attending support group meetings where he spoke frankly about his struggles for the first time. At one meeting, he declared, "My name is Raymond, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm here because I want to change." Each word carried the weight of what he was finally ready to face. Meanwhile, Stephanie and Jackson continued to build on the success of that night. Kevin stood by their side, guiding them with his experience in navigating the challenges of the music world. They were more than just a team, they were a chosen family, bound by their love for music and mutual respect. Seeing Stephanie and Jackson's growth, Kevin knew he had made the right choice in investing in them. He often said, "You are proof that music can change lives." He took pride in how they used their art to inspire and help others. Raymond, Stephanie, Jackson, and Kevin each walked their own path, facing challenges and celebrating successes. Each person's life was a unique melody, but now they all intertwined harmoniously, creating a symphony of redemption and hope that resonated beyond any theater walls.
It's been several years since music changed our lives. Jackson is now studying at a music school and has started composing his own songs. Watching his talent grow day by day is the greatest joy as a mother. Kevin has become more than just a producer, he's now a part of our family. Thanks to his guidance, our music is reaching the hearts of people all over the world. He always says, music is the language of the soul, and we experience the truth of those words every day. And Raymond. His transformation was truly a second spring in itself. He recovered from alcoholism and now works in the field of music therapy. He uses his own experiences to help people who are struggling through the power of music. When we all perform together, it's a magical moment. Seeing Raymond and Jackson play the piano together almost brings me to tears. Michael, I'm sure you're smiling down on us from heaven. It's thanks to you that our family has come together in such a wonderful way. Music has healed us, connected us, and opened new doors in our lives. I hope from the bottom of my heart for this beautiful harmony to continue forever.